Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. Olivia saw she had hit the target, and she hurriedly maneuvered the robot back, exposing Carl's robot in the smoke. She shouted nervously, "Are you okay?" As no one answered, she clenched her fingers anxiously. But soon, she saw that her golden warrior had damaged the entire stand, leaving behind a pit, but the spherical robot of Carl at the bottom of the pit was unscathed. Everyone looked in shock at what had happened. They all saw clearly the attack parameters of Olivia's robot, which were the best of all her strengths. But even such a powerful attack could not leave a scratch on Carl's robot. How could this be? Olivia was surprised, her mouth agape. She knew the attack strength of her robot. Ordinary robots could not withstand its slash. But this robot was obviously different. It seemed that it had a very high defense capability. Carl's voice resonated inside the robot. He rolled randomly as if he wanted to dust off his body. "Have you finished your attack? If so, now it's my turn," he said excitedly. Everyone looked on as the spherical robot rolled like a yo-yo. It was so quick that it almost hit the limit with layers of afterimages behind him. Olivia looked at what had happened with her mouth agape. What the hell is this? There was a faint smile on Nicole's face as she watched the robot shoot at Olivia like a thunderbolt, its attack strength soaring in an instant, even higher than that of Olivia's robot. Janice looked at the data scrolling in front of his eyes and squinted. He subconsciously looked at Jared and slowly wrote what he saw when Jared gently nodded his head. After all, Carl and Nicole's relationship was unusual. He needed to get Jared's permission. The battle had reached a white-hot intensity. Carl's robot was not only ridiculously powerful in attack, but its defenses were the most terrifying. He was able to turn a blind eye to almost all of Olivia's attacks, which could not even leave a scratch on Carl's robot. Olivia's golden warrior had been partially damaged by Carl's robot. The left arm of the handsome male robot had been broken by the constant rolling impact, now hanging freely on its chest. It hurt Olivia to see the damage that her robot suffered. "Stop! Stop! I concede!" she cried out. Carl stopped the robot from rolling and cancelled his next round of attacks immediately. Olivia walked over to her robot in a fit of rage, touching the mutilated left arm before quickly leaving the ring. Seeing Carl win, a hint of delight appeared on Nicole's face. Carl stepped out of the cockpit, his handsome face in stark contrast to the cute robot behind him. Everyone looked at what had happened with mixed feelings. Carl could not care less. He gently sorted his messy blonde hair and then immediately searched for Nicole in the crowd. A light flashed in his eyes when he saw the smile on Nicole's face. Seeing all that Carl had in his eyes was Nicole, Vera clenched her fists in anger. What has this girl done that Carlisle likes her so much? Nicole ignored Vera's resentful gaze. The first round of the competition was coming to an end. Simon, who was assigned to the last group, had easily defeated his opponent using the second-generation robot he and Mary had designed. Looking at the player who was younger than himself on the other side, a trace of malice flashed in his eyes as he looked at the participant who was younger than him. He and Mary were the children of the second wife of their father, much younger than Eba and Elijah. So they took part in this year's robotic competition, but these people could not arouse his interest in fighting. But looking at his opponent's handsome and young face, Simon had an envious look on his ugly face. He stared at the man in front of him, commanding his robot to destroy the opponent's robot even though he had won the battle. He looked triumphant when he saw his opponent's pale face. So what if he is young and good-looking? He is still being trampled under my feet. Elijah watched Simon's actions and frowned subtly. When Eba saw Simon not stop attacking, he shouted at him, "You've already won. Stop it." Only then Simon stopped, looking at the boy in front of him, and said coldly, "People like you aren't qualified to fight me." He said in a voice that only the boy could hear. But in front of everyone else, Simon gently helped the boy, who almost had a mental breakdown, up and said gently, "You can do better next time." Nicole could read Simon's lips. An icy glint flashed across her eyes. Simon wants to ruin the kid. She looked at the triumphant Simon, and her eyes turned frosty as if there was some kind of intense emotion surging in them. They looked a little depressed and solemn. Does this kind of person deserve to live in this world? Soon Elijah announced the commencement of the second round of the draw. Everyone stared nervously at the numbers on the big screen, afraid that they would be assigned to the same group with a powerful opponent and that they could not enter the top 10. Vera looked wide-eyed at the numbers on the screen. She was not sure if it was good news. Her next opponent was none other than Nicole, who came to this round without having to fight in the last round. Nicole looked at the number 4 on the screen and raised an eyebrow, but she said nothing. Seeing the excitement and confidence on Vera's face, everyone looked at her with envy. In their eyes, Nicole was the best low-hanging fruit. Whoever faced her in this round of battle could easily defeat her and advance to the top 10. Nicole looked calm. When she heard the whistle, she quickly jumped into the ring and raised her chin at Vera. "Come on." Those people under the stage looked at Nicole and rose in an uproar. Nicole is just as ridiculous as she is arrogant. Everyone looked at Nicole with disdain. Vera was even more so. She looked at Nicole and mocked her. "Are you really sure you want me to strike first?" Nicole nodded with a straight face. She then saw Vera let out a sweet smile and then unceremoniously enter the body of her robot. "There you go." There was a hint of coldness in Vera's sweet voice. Nicole watched the massive female robot lunge toward her, but she was cool, calm, and collected. As the attack approached, she bellowed, "Dodge." Then everyone saw a motorcycle appear behind her. Clearly, no one was riding it, but it seemed to have its own mind and came in front of Nicole quickly. Nicole pressed her fingers on the Dodge Tomahawk and uttered, "Transform." Her voice was soft, but it seemed to ring in everyone's ears. Everyone watched the silvery white motorcycle, which had received Nicole's instructions, stood erect, its 2 wheels tucked away, the angular body landing on the ground with its front wheel unfolding. The door above the wheel rapidly transformed to form the upper body of a robot. The front of the motorcycle spun around, the handlebars vertically folding into the sides of the front, forming the head of the robot. The seat in the middle was wrapped up in layers of steel, soon forming a closed metal enclosure. The robot then kneeled on one knee, the azure screen on the extremely proportioned head flashing as it looked at Nicole and effortlessly blocked Vera's attack. The data on the big screen was garbled for a moment, then stuck at 0. People from the Terman family were stunned to see the transformation. Many of them had only heard of Dodge Tomahawk as the Terman family's killer weapon. But it was also the most mysterious weapon that few people had actually seen. It was said to be the top first-generation robot that had unfathomably high combat strength. But no one knew how a motorcycle could fight in a battle. They were all in shock upon seeing what had happened. It turned out that the Dodge Tomahawk was called by that name because of its unique way of existence. Everyone looked at this cold silvery white robot, which was unusually beautiful, looking breathtakingly tough. At the end of its mechanical right arm was a unit of the most advanced heavy weapon, looking really like a thorny tomahawk, with a strong murderous vibe. People looked at the Dodge Tomahawk in awe and with covetousness. This is the real top-notch robot. Its glinting silvery white body makes it look out of this world. Simon looked at the Dodge Tomahawk with his mouth agape. This was what he had been looking for all his life. He thought Elijah had given it to Carlisle, but he said he had given the Dodge Tomahawk to someone else at the time. And the person who was praised by Elijah turned out to be Nicole. How could such a robot be handed over to an outsider? Everyone watched in shock and disbelief as the Dodge Tomahawk slowly stood up and beside Nicole. It was the first time they had seen the robot in person. Mary also looked in disbelief. She had seen the Dodge Tomahawk before, but because she was not its owner, she was not qualified to see it transform, nor did she see its intuitive submission. The Dodge Tomahawk was a top-notch robot because it recognized its master. The reason Simon was so angry when he heard Elijah take out the Dodge Tomahawk and even give it to others was that he knew in his heart that the Dodge Tomahawk was no ordinary robot, and there was a good chance he had lost the possibility of owning it forever as it would only have one master. Mary's face contorted, and she looked indescribably icy at the thought of this. Her eyes were filled with extreme resentment as she looked at Nicole in the ring. She was the most powerful mechanical engineer in the Terman family, and she was supposedly the one who deserved to own this robot. But now, all her hopes had been dashed. No one could feel the shock of seeing the robot's transformation more intuitively than Vera. The robot was forced several steps back after its attack was blocked by the dodged tomahawk, but Vera still stood where she was, not realizing her current situation. What the hell is going on? She looked at the dodged tomahawk and trembled. This is the robot I have dreamed of, the most perfect pinnacle of existence. Now it has fallen into the hands of Nicole. How did you summon the dodged tomahawk? What makes you deserve it? Hand over the dodged tomahawk now. Vera shouted, her voice resonating inside the robot, sounding like a harsh hum. She was unaware of the dodged tomahawk's characteristics, and when she said such a thing, it was simply out of extreme jealousy. Nicole glanced at Vera faintly, not bothering to speak to her, but just stood there quietly. Beside her was the godlike silvery white robot, its azure screen flickering as if it had some kind of special intelligence. Upon hearing Vera's question, it looked icily at Vera's robot with a sense of hostility in its eyes. It had keenly captured Vera's attitude toward Nicole. Nicole gently raised her hand to stroke the robot. She ignored Vera's provocation, her expression calm. This isn't the dodged tomahawk you think. Everyone was stunned upon hearing what she said. What did she mean? Something seemed to flash in Elijah's eyes as he squinted at the robot with surprise. Eber had just come out from the shock of seeing Nicole summoning the dodged tomahawk. He looked back at Elijah in disbelief as if trying to read something out of his expression. What the hell is going on? How did the dodged tomahawk end up in her hands? Elijah squinted at Eber. She has said it, it's not what you think it is. Eber subconsciously rubbed his eyes and took a look at it again in disbelief. But no matter how he looked, it was still the first-generation dodged tomahawk robot that the Terman family kept in the robotic cabin. He was still confused, but Elijah just let out a faint smile as if he had no intention of explaining. Janice had seen the dodged tomahawk transform and was deeply amazed. Dino said at that time that you all have seen this motorcycle in Nottingbrook State, and you know all along this dodged tomahawk is not just a motorcycle, right? Jared did not respond to him. He gazed at Nicole with admiration and a thoughtful look, impressed that Nicole always had surprises for him. He indeed knew early on that the dodged tomahawk was more than just a motorcycle. When he saw it at Nottingbrook State, he wondered who its owner was. It turned out that it was Nicole. A faint smile crept across his face at the thought of this. He looked at Janice and said lightly, "Follow up the progress over there with Ryan." Janice acknowledged that and looked down at the tablet in his hand. He suddenly found that the data of Nicole's robot was almost readable, seemingly beyond the readable parameter, or its combat effectiveness was unknown. At first, Janice still looked calm, but now he seemed in shock. He had thought that the big screen in the ring had malfunctioned, showing that Nicole's combat data was 0. Now it seemed that, like him, it was impossible to read the data at all. No wonder the girl said the dodged tomahawk wasn't what they thought. Could it be that she modified and built it herself, and it couldn't fight at all? Many people in the audience came out of their shock and looked at the lifeless figures on the big screen. Combined with what Nicole had just said, they seemed to have figured out what it was about. They had been blinded by Nicole, mistaken for the one they had just seen as the actual dodged tomahawk. They all furrowed their brows with this realization. Mary carefully looked at the robot next to Nicole again and finally found that it differed from the dodged tomahawk she had seen. Nicole's robot seems to be darker under its ribs, looking like two thin black patterns, and the overall fuselage has a special texture and mysterious vibe. But the dodged tomahawk, I remember, has no such pattern on it. Mary sneered at the thought of this. Nicole really put a lot of effort into faking it. If it weren't because these two crack-like patterns gave her away, I might have truly believed that this is the actual dodged tomahawk. She casually flicked her long hair and said in a voice that everyone could hear, "This is indeed a fake. I did not expect it to look so much like the real thing." Everyone knew Mary had indeed seen the dodged tomahawk before. If she said that this dodged tomahawk was fake, it must be fake. Judging by Nicole's words and also her not entering the robot's cockpit all this time, people, who were at first awed by this dodged tomahawk, became suspicious of it. Vera had heard what Mary said too, and looked askance at Nicole's robot. Since Aunt Mary had said that, Nicole's robot must be a fake. Fear turned into disdain in her eyes. Vera looked viciously, and then she directed her robot to charge at Nicole. Nicole looked at Vera and cocked an eyebrow. She stood and did not dodge. The display screen on the silvery white robot's head flashed with blue light, and there seemed to be a faint rustling sound of data calculations deep in its eyes. The robot slowly raised its hand, and an electronic hum came with a sense of warning. Incoming. Vera named her robot Biello, which was best at fighting. It was still formidable in close-quarters combat, using brute force without the help of heavy firepower. Its gravity system is very average, strength is so-so, but its lightweight and mechanical strength are the best advantages. As long as I can get close to Nicole, I'm confident of defeating Nicole using no weapon. Thinking of this, an icy smile that was out of character with her charming appearance crept across her face, as if she could already see her defeat Nicole. Her robot is just a second-generation counterfeit that doesn't even have a cab. I can smash it to pieces with just a punch. Nicole looked at the approaching Biello with a straight face. Dodge, level 5 combat readiness. Her voice was so soft that almost no one could hear her. Subsequently, Vera was surprised to see some hidden changes to the silvery white robot. Its body was glowing, but it seemed to only strengthen one of its arms. Vera had no idea what her opponent was doing. She directed her robot, as she had just done before, to strike at her opponent's legs, and after clamping her opponent, she would ride on her opponent's back to attack its head. She had defeated many opponents with this move, and it almost worked all the time. But just as she smiled and felt that she was about to win and beat the damn stupid woman who seduced Carlyle, the silvery white robot suddenly moved. There were only less than 10 feet between them. Vera's smile froze. Before she knew what had happened, a bolt of lightning flashed in front of her eyes, and then she felt the world spinning around her, and the ear-shattering of her screams came through the robot's amplifier. None of the people in the audience bothered to watch the battles in the other rings. They looked at what happened in front of them with their mouths agape, as the silvery white robot, which did not move just now, had just struck Vera's robot with a punch. Its move looked so effortless yet lightning quick. Vera's robot was sent spinning and flying out of the ring and disappeared into the distance. It took a few seconds before the sound of steel impacting the ground was heard. Everyone looked at what happened with their jaws dropping to the ground. They all wondered what kind of speed and strength could hit a robot weighing over 6,600 pounds and send it flying. Nicole looked on and frowned as Vera disappeared into the horizon as if she did not expect such a result. Did I set the strength level too high? She asked herself in her mind. She also did not expect her opponent to be so weak. According to the opponent's battle data, she had chosen a conservative strength level, and yet it was still so lethal. I should have chosen the strength level of 6 or 7 inch. She did not regret it though. She glanced at Elijah, who still appeared languid as usual, and looked at her with satisfaction and appreciation in his eyes. Nicole won. It was Nicole, the girl whom we have always thought didn't even know what robots are, who has won. Everyone looked grave. Even Eber was a little surprised. He had seen Nicole's abilities since the day she first came, but he did not expect that she had such a talent in robotics. Right now, as Eber looked at Nicole, there was a hint of mixed feelings in his eyes. He realized he had still underestimated this girl. Mary and Simon in the audience were also amazed, their faces turning from triumphant to pale. Mary, in particular, almost gritted her teeth as she looked at Nicole. What the hell is going on with this girl who possesses such a powerful robot? She still believed that the robot in the ring could not be the Dodge Tomahawk. But the fact that it could attain such a strength level showed it was an excellent robot, almost approaching the medium combat strength of first-generation robots. Mary looked at Nicole, her eyes cold, with a sly smile on her face. That's more like it. The opponent needs to have a certain level of strength to be worth my time. The next round was Mary's turn. She quickly eliminated her opponent, while Carl had also eliminated his, leaving only 5 contestants in the rings, glancing at each other with a faint hostility in their eyes. Simon was also among them. Luck was on his side today, as his opponents were his juniors in both rounds of battle. Since they lacked experience in robotic combat and manufacturing, Simon won it quickly and effortlessly. Nicole watched as Vera and her robot were being carried back. Biello was clearly scrapped. Its iron-gray metal body had broken to pieces, somewhat tattered. Vera, who was protected in the cab, was unharmed, but the rolling and spinning motions made her sick. She was dizzy and throwing up the big time until the family doctor of the Terman family gave her a shot of Downer. She was basically unhurt, but she lost the chance of getting into the top 10. Many people looked at Vera with schadenfreude. Vera seemed to have a good temper, but it was only in front of the direct descendants and people of higher rank than her. She could not care less about them on normal days, as she was arrogant and always thought that she would get into the top 3 in this competition. But now, she had not even gotten into the final. Vera felt the gazes around her, her fingers clenching together. She could no longer control her expression, and she looked at Nicole with vicious eyes, almost like she was going to rip Nicole into pieces. Nicole ignored Vera and stood with Carl, who seemed to be happy talking to her about how badass the Dodge Tomahawk was. Mary overheard their conversation and could not help but sneer. "Carlisle, you're just as dumb as Nicole. How could that robot be the Dodge Tomahawk? It's nowhere as good as the Dodge Tomahawk. Didn't you see the data displayed on the big screen when she launched attacks just now? It wasn't even half of that of the Dodge Tomahawk," Mary said. At this point, she could not hide the disdain on her face. Carl glanced at her, his blue eyes lacking emotion, as if he were looking at a strange living thing. What did she know about the Dodge Tomahawk, so much so that she wants to make a big fuss about it here? Nicole looked at Carl's expression and gently shook her head at him, then shot a glance at the defiant Mary. She did not want to put Carl on the spot, as Mary was still Carl's aunt. In the VIP seat, Jared was taking it all in. His eyes flashed with cold light as his gaze landed on Mary's malicious face. At this moment, a look of surprise appeared on Janice's face. He whispered a few words to the messenger through the satellite headset and then bent down and whispered in Jared's ear. Jared's face darkened in an instant. Nicole just happened to turn her head to look at him, and Jared smiled back at her as normal. There was a gentle look flashed in Nicole's eyes. As she turned her head back, the draw results were being shown on the big screen. She found her opponent was a newcomer, while Carl's opponent was Simon. Simon looked at Carl with a natural smile. "I didn't want to fight you, Uncle Simon." Simon's face looked grave. "Stop pretending. The things that you've learned in Hustuaberg aren't going to work on me." Carl looked at the ugly man. Instead of getting angry, he smiled. He wanted to be courteous now before beating him up later. Nicole ended the battle in no time. As she had just done, she did not get into the cab. But this time, she had dealt with her opponent gentler, only causing some slight damage to the robot and forcing it out of the ring. Almost everyone was sure that this imitation Dodge Tomahawk was a brilliant second-generation robot. Since Nicole's robot could defeat the other 2 robots so easily, it could almost prove that the quality of her robot was equal, if not higher, than that of the top second-generation robots and may even be close to the first-generation models. Janice looked at the fluctuating battle values and was surprised to see that Nicole's battle values only varied at the moment she launched her attack, and the values shown in the 2 battles were very different. It was as if she set the strength level of her robot to suit her opponents. Jared looked at Nicole, who had a deadpan face with a faint smile in his eyes. He paid no attention to Janice's question and tapped on the table with the fingers of his right hand. Janice looked at his boss's face and whispered, "I've sent someone to deal with it, and there should be results soon." Jared nodded gently, knowing that his opponent had become restless. The fact that Elijah did not invite the Terman family's vassals, but him, it was self-evident. But our opponents are no fools, Jared thought of Ryan's grim, hostile countenance with a self-absorbed look on his face. Just then, there was a loud noise coming from the ring, followed by an awful scream. "Carlisle, you bastard. Just wait and see." Simon watched as his robot was rammed around and damaged by Carlisle's robot, called Pando. He tried to call it back, but Carl ignored him, or rather deliberately did not let go upon noticing Simon's predicament. He was rolling toward Simon, who was so frightened that he quickly directed his tattered robot to block Carl in front of him. The 2 collided, and Simon's robot was instantly knocked off the ring. Carl controlled Pando, staying precisely on the edge of the ring. Then he slowly stepped out of the cockpit and looked condescendingly at Simon, who could not even get up. As Carl was against the light, Simon could not see his expression clearly, but he could hear his mocking voice. "Uncle Simon, I'm not pretending this time, am I? I really enjoyed beating you up, the feeling was so real." Simon was so furious that he pointed at Carl's head with a trembling finger but could not find a word to respond. Elijah watched what Carlyle had done and then looked at Simon's face. He cocked an eyebrow and said in a perfunctory voice, "How could you hit your uncle so hard, Carl? You knew the quality of your uncle's robot, didn't you? Hurry up and apologize to him." Nicole looked at the father and son with a smirk. They sang the same tune and hit Simon where it hurt, successfully taking revenge for the young guy whom Simon humiliated just now. With no hesitation, Carl apologized to Simon, saying that he had a strong desire to win, that he would become merciless, even to his relatives, to achieve victory, and that he felt bad for beating up Simon. In short, he made it sound as if Simon would be a petty man if he still harped on the issue. After all, this was a competition. Losing was losing, and the loser needed to get over it. Simon stood up, blue in the face. He looked at Carl with a somber face and then glanced at Elijah and Eber sitting on the stand with cold eyes. The hatred look in his eyes was apparent. Nicole looked at his expression and raised her eyebrow. Simon said nothing, as he did not want to embarrass himself more. "When I get my hands on the first-generation robot, I will make them pay for what they've done to me today." He felt much better at the thought of this. He walked straight outside, not even looking back. Elijah looked at Simon from behind with deep emotion in his eyes. After all, Simon was his half-brother, and he still thought about giving him another chance. What if he thinks it through later? Nicole knew what Elijah thought, looking at him silently and gently pursing her lips. Jared looked at Nicole's expression and also knew what she was thinking. He slouched in his chair and looked at Elijah without uttering a word. Janice saw his boss's expression and stood by without saying a word too. Soon, only Nicole, Mary, Carl, and 3 indirect descendants were left at the competition venue. 2 of the 3 robots of the indirect descendants had surpassed the standard of second-generation robots, and the other one was slightly weaker but still one of the best of its rank. Vera looked at those people in the ring and bit her lip in hatred. "If it weren't for Nicole, I would have been one of them in the ring now, not a crap inferior to me like her." She stared dead at Nicole. Suddenly, she saw Olivia, whom Carl had defeated. She stared at the rig with relish and suddenly became upset. She came up to Olivia and said coldly, "You lost to Carlyle. How could you still have the nerve to stay here?" Knowing Vera's modus operandi, Olivia blinked and shrugged. "Even you who lost to an outsider have the nerve to stay, so why can't I be here?" Vera did not expect that Olivia would dare to talk back. She was infuriated but could not find a word to respond. People around were looking at Vera with contempt and seemed to mock her for being defeated mercilessly, despite being claimed to be the most powerful person. She looked so frustrated. Olivia looked at Vera, who had always known best how to manipulate those indirect descendants because they were not as good as she was. Some of them who defied her had almost been marginalized by the small team she led. Fortunately, with Olivia's current strength, she was very confident in confronting Vera's provocation. At first, Vera wanted to vent her frustration with Olivia. But when she saw Olivia dared to be rude to her, she got even angrier. At this time, the draw results were out. Vera looked up and was surprised to see that the first pair were Carlyle and Mary. Nicole's opponent was one of the most powerful indirect descendants in terms of general strength. He looked at Nicole and blushed. Nicole was cool, standing there silently, and out of respect for the boy, she set the Dodge Tomahawk's battle mode back to level 5 with little time to react. The boy's robot was knocked down at once. Nicole saw the surprised look on the boy's face. He reached his hand to scratch his head as if feeling embarrassed for losing just like that. "I thought I could hold on a little longer," he said. Nicole gently raised an eyebrow, looking with appreciation as the boy conceded defeat and stepped out of the ring gracefully. Probably her gaze had stopped on the boy for a few seconds too long. A low voice came from above her head, saying, "Stop looking already." Nicole looked up in surprise to see that Jared was sitting there, fiddling with the dagger that always told of the state of his mood. She glanced at him helplessly and then looked away resolutely. "Well, okay," she said. When Jared heard Nicole's response, The icy look in his eyes eased up. He hated to see Nicole look at other guys. Even if he knew she meant nothing else, he just could not stand it. Janice, on the side, felt the change of mood of his boss. But after seeing Nicole yield to his boss's demand, he felt a sense of relief with a little surprised lock in his eyes. Boss has never revealed his emotions like this. Whenever he expresses some kind of strong desire, he surely wants to achieve a certain goal. He never revealed his cards so that others could not tell what his intentions were. But when facing Nicole, my boss's mind seems like an open book. Janice did not dare to look into Jared's eyes. He could only take a few glances at Nicole in a predicament. As he was doing that, he heard a bitter voice mixed with a faint sense of smirk. "You enjoy looking at her?" Janice nodded subconsciously, but he quickly realized his mistake, his face instantly turning pale. He shook his head. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.